Why agricultural products have inelastic supply? This is something that will come up again and again in your A-level exam question. There is a good reason for that. Because this issue that agricultural products have relatively inelastic supply, this issue creates a practical problem for the farmers, for the producers of these agricultural goods. And we now want to understand what is that problem. What is the problem that farmers face because the product they are trying to sell has inelastic supply? Now let me explain that problem over here, and I will then refer back to what we already have up there in terms of the understanding we have built about the different determinants. But the problem, first of all, and the reason why we have been stressing and trying to understand why agricultural commodities have inelastic supply, the reason for that is that, you see, when agricultural commodities, when their supply is inelastic, that means that the price of these agricultural commodities, it will fluctuate a lot. It will change a lot. And as the price fluctuates, remember, the producers of these agricultural goods, they are farmers. So if the price of these agricultural products is changing a lot, that means that the incomes of the farmers, that will fluctuate a lot as well. And that is a problem, because, you see, if there is uncertainty of income for the farmers, then that is a big problem, because they can't plan for the future. They can't plan how much they will spend on education or how much they will save, and so on and so forth. And this is such a serious problem that the government will often try and take measures to reduce the inelasticity of supply of agricultural products. They will try to take measures, we can say, which try to achieve an increase in the supply elasticity of these agricultural commodities. Now, what we want to do is that, in terms of, okay, how do we understand or explain why is this a problem? What we need to do is we need to think graphically. So let me draw a graph over here. So this, remember, is what you will be asked in your essay questions. What is the problem that is created for farmers given the supply of agricultural commodities is very inelastic? And the way you will explain that and the way you will understand that is through this diagram. So let's draw a demand curve over here. And let's draw another demand curve which is almost similar to the one we have drawn on the left. So the x's are similar, the demand curve is same. The only difference that we are going to make in these two diagrams here is that here in the first graph on the left, we are going to make a supply curve which is very steep, and that would capture the fact that the supply is very inelastic. And we will mark out the price over here. So the price, let's say, initially is P star. Now in the second diagram, roughly speaking, we are going to make sure that we draw the supply curve so it crosses at this point, and therefore we have a similar price as to the one on the left. But we are going to draw a supply curve which is much more flat. Now this flat supply curve passing through the y-axis, remember, means that we are talking about a supply which is very elastic. Now given this starting point, you see, the thing is, and let's assume that here we are talking about agricultural commodities since the supply is inelastic, and let's assume here we are talking about manufactured goods since the supply we are saying is elastic. Now the important thing we need to take away from this graph is that, look, if the market conditions change in both these cases and the demand supply starts to change, and let's assume that the demand increases. So let's increase the demand over here. Let's shift it to the right. So this is the new demand. Let's call it D2. And let's increase this demand almost by the same amount. So here we are moving it to the right by almost this horizontal distance. So let's shift this demand to the right by almost the same horizontal distance. So we are trying to capture that the demand has changed by almost the same magnitude. Now, if you look at this graph on the left, where you have, where everything is the same, the only difference is that on the graph on the left hand side, we have a very steep inelastic supply. Here we have a very flat elastic supply. Now you see, when the demand has increased in this graph on the left, if you work out this new equilibrium, you will see that the price has increased by almost this vertical distance over here. Whereas if you look at this graph on the right, this is the initial equilibrium price. I should have drawn it out previously, but let's do it now. Now, given a shift or increase in demand of almost the same magnitude, if you work out the new equilibrium and check the price, you will see the price has increased, but relative to the case on the left, the increase in price is very minimal. And this is where we say that, look, agricultural commodities, they have inelastic supply. And therefore, when the demand for agricultural commodities change, the price changes quite a lot. And since price is changing quite a lot, the incomes of these farmers will change quite a lot. Whereas as far as manufactured goods are concerned, whose supply is relatively more elastic, you see, starting from P star, given the same amount of increase in demand, the price does increase, but it increases just a little bit. It doesn't increase a lot. So there is not going to be a lot of fluctuation in the price, and therefore there is not going to be a lot of fluctuation in the incomes of these producers of manufactured goods. And that is how you explain this whole idea in your A-level exams when you are asked, okay, what is the problem created by the inelasticity of supply of agricultural commodities? You draw these two graphs. You can do it on one graph if you are comfortable. You just, within this graph, draw another supply curve passing through the same initial equilibrium. So let me do that in blue color. So here, if you have drawn this as the inelastic supply, just draw another supply curve, which is relatively flat. So this would mean a supply which is relatively more elastic. And you can show on the same graph that, look, starting from this equilibrium, as the demand increases to D2, according to this white inelastic supply, price increases to P. According to this blue elastic supply, the price will only increase up till this point, much lesser increase. So agricultural products, when they have an elastic supply, their prices fluctuate a lot as demand changes in the market, and therefore the incomes of the farmers fluctuate. And that is how you explain this problem caused by the inelasticity of supply. And then finally, the examiner will ask you, okay, what can the government do in order to make the supply of agricultural products more elastic? Or sometimes he will say, what can the government do to make the supply of the agricultural products less inelastic? So it means the same thing. Making something more elastic or less inelastic means the same thing. So what can the government do to do this to the supply of agricultural products? And to answer that question, all we need to do is we need to go back to the determinants of PES that we discussed previously. Now, as far as this question of, okay, what can the government do to reduce the inelasticity of supply of agricultural products, you just need to focus on these determinants. The first determinant of a product's elasticity of supply is length of production process. Now, agricultural products, they have a long production process, and that is why they have an elastic supply. But the government can't do anything to help reduce the production process. Apples will take as much time as they have to take. So, the government can't do anything about this. But as far as storability is concerned, the government can do a lot. Because remember, we said agricultural commodities, they have inelastic supply because it is difficult to store them. So you have to bring whatever you have produced to the market. You can't hold back production, and therefore you don't have anything in the store. So therefore, when prices increase, you don't have any reserve that you can quickly bring into the market. So what the government can do to make the agricultural product supply more elastic is they can help provide better storage facilities to the farmers. Maybe they can offer government-run and government-financed cold storages. Maybe they can offer loans where farmers can invest in their cold storages of their own. But this is one thing that the government can do. They can provide or improve the amount of storability or the quality of storage that is available for agricultural products. A lot of countries, a lot of governments, they do this. They let the farmers grow all these things, but when it's time to store them, the government provides cheap storage facilities. So that's the first thing that the government can do. Then what the government can do is that, look, if there is ease of adding capacity, then we said that, look, with the ease of adding capacity, the producers become more flexible, they can respond more to changes in price, and the supply would become more elastic. Now, adding capacity as far as agricultural products is concerned is maybe where the government again helps the farmers get more tractors, get more harvesters. Maybe the government cannot give more free land, but it can make sure that these farmers get more capital goods. Maybe they can help them, give them loans and develop new technologies where irrigation systems can improve. And that maybe can add capacity in the sense that you can get more out of the same piece of land and so on and so forth. So this is something where the government can help directly by making all of these things, better irrigation systems and so on and so forth, maybe distributing free harvesters, or maybe simply giving loans and cheap credit to these farmers so they can do all of these things and add capacity to whatever piece of land that they own. And then, number 4 is where the government can do something, number 2 is where the government can do something, and then this number 5, ease of switching between products. Now here, if you think about agricultural commodities, what the government can do is that the government can maybe educate farmers and use their agricultural universities to conduct agricultural research and come up with new varieties of seeds which are more flexible. Maybe you can train your farmers better. Maybe you can sort of, give them something that uses the latest technology and therefore, somehow helps you to make it easier to switch between products. So these therefore are some of the things that the government can do to lessen the inelasticity or make the supply of the agricultural commodities more elastic. But in addition to knowing what the government can do, you also need to remember that all of these steps that we are saying that the government can take, they will all be costly. They will all involve a cost for the government. And cost, remember, in economics implies that there will be an opportunity cost, meaning that if the government uses some of its resources to help increase the elasticity of supply of agricultural commodities, it will cost the government quite a lot of money, and that will mean the government cannot do some other good things for the people and the economy. So there is always going to be an opportunity cost. Similarly, the ease of giving credit. We are saying that, give easy credit, give cheap credit to these farmers. Again, it is just not possible for some of the poor countries to do that. They have limited resources, they have weak financial systems, they don't have a large network of banking and so on and so forth. So even if the government wants, it's not very easy to give credit. Very few people have formal bank accounts and so on and so forth. So, there are steps that can be taken, but it will always be difficult. Similarly, when we say that conduct agricultural research and train the farmers to use the latest IT and equipment and technology, again, providing this training is not easy. So let me just link it up with this. So training of farmers to use IT, to become more flexible and to be able to more easily switch between different products. It's easy to say that train the farmers, educate them, but training itself is difficult. It will need money, it will have to be relevant, and it will have to be of a good quality, otherwise it will not bear any fruit. Now, we can go on and on about this, but I want to close this entire discussion of price elasticity of supply over here. And remember, I will just write it down somewhere on this side over here, that it has been a long discussion. But remember, basically, we have been talking about the determinants of a product's price elasticity of supply. But remember, we need to know them in reference to the elasticity of supply of agriculture and manufactured goods. Remember, agricultural goods, they have inelastic supply. It creates a problem that the incomes of the farmers fluctuate. You should be able to express this problem graphically, and then you should be able to talk about a few things that the government can do to make the supply more elastic and the problems that the government itself will face in its attempt to achieve this increased elasticity of supply for the farmers.